All right, folks, we're ready to start our next session. So this is Training That Works, building a training model that promotes teamwork, communication, and continual support, presented by Becky Qualls of Pittsburg State University. So welcome, thank you.
Okay, can everybody hear me? All right, so just to let you know, I just want to prepare you. I've already dropped the microphone this morning and knocked the batteries out of it. The computer I was going to use didn't work. My fonts weren't loaded on the computer that I'm on, so I had to switch my PowerPoint. So, hey, be prepared for anything. But that's what we're used to in training, so it kind of just goes right along with what we're going to talk about. All right, we have recently needed a model to find some training that works, because we, in the last year, actually, you guys know how it works in higher education, about the last 5 years, we've actually been working on getting a new ERP system and getting that implemented on campus. And so the pieces that we implemented were finance, procurement, and we're currently doing HR. So as we worked on this and started looking at it, we control most of the enterprise training on campus. Some of the academic things, we have other people that handle that for our faculty and staff, but all of our enterprise services, we handle the training. We're considered the experts. But we do not work in the systems that we're talking about. I'm lucky enough that while I have a team that I manage, I don't have to worry about all the expense stuff in my department. I don't actually work in the finance system. I don't have to work in procurement. We have a finance officer in our department, and anything that we need to purchase goes through her and then to our CIO. And so I don't work in these systems. Most of the time when we're doing enterprise training, one of us is the one that becomes the user expert. We're the one who learns how to use the system even if we haven't before, and we're the ones who get in there and we do the training so that we're the ones that people ask questions to. If you guys have ever done any training, you know that even if you had to do it on the fly, if you're standing in the front of the room, you're the expert. It doesn't matter if you learned it yesterday. If everybody's listened to you give the presentation, all of a sudden, you're the expert. Every question is going to come to you, and you better know how to answer it. So one of the challenges that we had was we knew we weren't going to be these people. We were not going to be the ones that had to deliver the training. So to do that, we're going to have to couple with the people who are actually the experts who are not training experts. So it became this collaboration where we began first with our finance and procurement people, and we worked with them to develop training. Now this may have been the most integral piece of this whole process, because while it was a very small group of us, maybe 10 of us in a room at a time talking, they had no idea where to start with this. So the first thing we had to do, while we've worked with them before, we haven't really collaborated with them before as far as training goes. They've worked with our developers, but they hadn't worked with us for training. This was very challenging for us because our people were used to working in a system that was a 30-year-old legacy system that had been built from scratch by us and tweaked to fit the needs of the people there, and we are switching to an out-of-the-box system that we're going to have to integrate. So this was going to be huge for us. Now, let me say this. The finance and procurement pieces actually affected a much smaller group of campus for training. There was only about 120 people that really needed training, as opposed to our HR, which we have about 2,000 employees on campus that have needed training, including all of our part-time and seasonal workers. But the difference was our HR training, for the most part, the learning curve has been very low. For the finance and procurement piece, much smaller group of people, learning curve very high. Very different than what they were used to. So in working with our finance and procurement people, we sat down with them and we told them, what you need to do is you need to come up, sit down and think about all of the things these people need to be trained on, and we'll start there. They came back to us with a list of about 18 things that needed to be trained on. Looking at that list, I thought there is no way in the time that we have that these things are all going to be together. So we sat down and had some real conversations about how do these things work together. You go back, look at this, and see what we can group together. And that's what they did. They came back to us with a list of about 11 things, which was much more manageable. And they said, here's what we think can go together. So it became very interesting while we were working with them for them to be able to trust us to tell them, here's the way this needs to work. Now, I'll tell you, as the main trainer on campus, people know when they come to trainings for me, an hour. And I'll tell you, I was a high school teacher for a lot of years, and An hour is pushing it. An hour, you're pushing people to the limit of what they're going to pay attention to. So most of the time, we try to keep our trainings right around an hour. And so that's what we told them, this is the goal that we want to do. One of the first pieces that we established was, we're not the content experts. Our finance and procurement office, they're the ones who know about the system, but they also don't use it the same way our users do. Most of them are working on the back side of it. So the very first piece that we came up with was, we said, we want you guys to get together and we want you to tell us 12 to 14 people on campus that you think are what we would call super users. They're the ones who are in the system, they're stretching it to its limits, they're doing things that maybe they're the only one on campus that's doing it, but we're going to need the answers to those things, and that when we have training, they're going to be the ones that are going to ask you the most challenging questions. Now, I'll tell you, we had a lot of discussion about these people, because they would throw out people that I've had in training that I knew was a little technologically challenged. You guys know those people. They're the ones who, they know what they're supposed to do and point and click, but they don't think a lot outside the box, outside of the technology, because they don't really understand what it is the system is doing. We knew that those weren't the types of people that we wanted. We had some discussion about, should we have people who are going to struggle with this more? Nope, because you want the people that are going to throw out the hard questions, not the easy ones, not the ones that just don't understand, hey, I need to click here and click here and click here to make this work now. You want the ones who are going to say, okay, but what if we have this situation and we need it to do this? And so they came up with a list of about 14 people. We love acronyms on campus, so we came up with the term the SWAT Team. Okay, so we had a group that was the SWAT Team, and I just put this picture up here. It's Charlie's Angels, and that's not quite the same thing. But what we wanted these people to do was we wanted them to know, we're going to train you so that you can kick butt in the system, but you're going to look really pretty doing it. And that's what we wanted this team to be, because they were the ones that were going to reach out to the rest of campus and be the go-between. I work in campus services. We are first line of defense. We're that first tier of support. We like that terminology about tiers for support. We wanted this group to be the first tier of support for the rest of campus, and there is a reason for that. So we started out with 13 people originally. We had 14, but about the time we started training, one of the people was going to be off for quite a while, so we ended up with 13. I will tell you, of the 13, only 12 of them stayed long term. We had one person who, after a couple of weeks, she said, I've got so much going on with other things that are going on. There were some big changes in her department, and she said, I need to step away from this because I'm not sure I can do what you're asking me to do. So she did. We ended up with 12 people who stayed long term. Now, what we asked our SWAT team to do was we had training for them. And they assisted with the training development. So we had asked our finance and procurement team to sit down and say, hey, give us a list of the things that you feel need to be trained on. We worked with them to whittle that down, and then we said, what we're going to have you do is you're going to decide very long training sessions, and I'll talk about that in just a minute, but we want you to train this group of people, and they're going to give us input on this. So let me tell you how that worked. With training development, what we did was we had an initial kickoff meeting. So when we called these SWAT members, an email was sent out to them saying, hey, would you be interested in helping us with this? We're going to ask you to help us actually develop training and implement training. And they, of course, like I said, we only had the one person who actually dropped out, the one person who was gone. And so they all said, yep, we would be happy to do this. We have a meeting, we tell them, this is not all we're going to ask you to do. We're going to ask you to be involved once we start training. We're going to ask you to be involved long term. So just these initial training sessions is not the place that we're going to stop. Now, I do want to say this. We knew what we were asking of these people. These are the people on campus who are the admin assistants. They're the people who are working on all of the finance stuff and working with our athletics. And we knew the load they already had on them. We were asking a huge amount of them. We also knew they were the people on campus that if you called and asked them a question about something they were doing, they knew it, they could give you that answer within 10 seconds. So we knew these were the people that we needed. We really built them up a lot because I can't tell you how hard these people worked. It was a great group of people, and they did a fantastic job helping us, to the point that once we got done with our initial training and we had already started our training for the rest of campus, Dr. Scott actually hosted a luncheon for them at his house and thanked them them and gave them a little plaque recognizing the things that they had done. But that was one of the things I do want you to know that we did. We really wanted to reinforce to them, we really appreciate what you're doing because we know it's asking a lot of you. So our initial kickoff meeting, we told them all that. Then we split the group up into 2 groups. We split it into 6 people in each group, and we held 2 weekly trainings. Now, this is the only time I will tell you that I would ever plan a training for an hour and a half to 2 hours, but it was not your normal training. What we told our content experts was, we need to sit down and look at a logical order of how things need to be presented. And they did that. They sat down and they figured out, we need to do this first, they're gonna have to know this before they can do anything else. Excuse me. And then it was, if they do this, the next thing down, they can build on this. So we found these building blocks. If they do this first, there's going to be some pieces they already know before we jump into this piece too. We also found, as we were doing that, there were some things that need to be trained on that wasn't theirs. It was ours. There were things that we would jump in and do trainings on. Things like Acrobat, using Acrobat Pro for them to create PDFs that they would be using in the system. So we began to couple those things together. When we started training, we told them, here's what we want you to do. Come prepared to train as long as you can for that hour and a half to 2 hours. So if you get done with one thing and there's no more questions, let's jump to the next topic. And that's what we did during those trainings. When we went into the training, very first thing we did, we told the groups, do not hold back. We want you to ask us all the hard questions. We want you to give us scenarios that we wouldn't normally think about. We want you to interrupt us because we want everything to go in a sequence here so we can get all of the info that we need so training can be valuable for campus. Keep in mind, this particular group, we knew they were going to catch on to the training really quickly. We were not going to see the challenges with them of it's going to take us a while to explain this to them or have to keep going over it. So we knew we would have those challenges later on when we were training the big group for campus. But with these people, we wanted them to interrupt us and throw out those things. The training was very informal, okay? We had a U-shaped table. Our trainers sat at the very front of the table. They didn't stand. Most of the time, I always recommend people stand. That gives you a sense of authority. We didn't want that feeling in the room. We wanted it to be a community sense. We're all working together to get this going. We had no less than like 5 content experts in the room at the time, every time we did one of these trainings. So it was almost a one-on-one thing as we had those people in the room. We had as many content experts from procurement and from our business office as we did the people we were training in the room. Our sessions never lasted longer than 2 hours. They never lasted less than an hour and a half, and we never got through more than they planned in one session. So while they might say, we're going to talk about these 2 things today, that's all we ever got through. And sometimes we carried some things over after those 2-hour sessions. 6 weeks we did this. 2 trainings a week for 6 weeks. We did this to develop all of our training. And here's what came out of that. And we had 4 lab sessions, and I'll tell you about those in just a minute. During the actual SWAT training sessions, the content experts broke those down into 1 or 2 trainings to actually give to campus. And then there was a goal to create those in those 1-hour blocks. We wanted to know what's it going to take. And we actually filmed these. We provided them resources too. They always got the PowerPoint that was presented during training, plus they had job aids for them, PDFs. But we videotaped each one of these sessions, and we uploaded it the same day so that they could go back and look at things, which always prompted more questions. Once they went back and reviewed those videotape sessions, then they would send more questions out. And then we sent a survey, and I'm going to throw this up here. I'll send this PowerPoint to anybody who wants it, but these were our actual survey questions. There were only 4, and we sent these every time we did a training. So every survey actually had 2 sets of these because we covered 2 things during each session. And so they would have 2 sets of these survey questions. I'll be honest with you, not everybody answered these. They did not answer all these questions. We would get anywhere between 5 and 8 people answer after we had a training session, but that was really all we needed because they gave us great feedback off of these. We also knew there were some people, and I will tell you, I'll mention that in just a minute, who we knew would not be as interactive. They would be great in training, but wouldn't be as interactive afterward. We knew that would happen, we expected it, and we still picked those people, and I'll explain that in just a minute. Okay, so when we got ready to do campus training, It ended up that we had 9 different topics, and we ended up holding 123 sessions. And now when I tell you we held 123 sessions, that was between the last week of July and the last week of September. So in that 9-week period, we had 123 training sessions on our new ERP system. We also had 10 collaboration sessions. Those were lab sessions. That's the same thing I mentioned earlier for the SWAT team. We had 10 collaboration sessions where people could just come in. We had the room filled with not only content experts, but also our SWAT members, and they would help people with whatever they needed. So it was after we would have a session, we would have a lab session, so people would just come in and work, ask specific questions. I'm doing this, how do I do this, where does this go? And these were great. We also had 2 cutover plan sessions, where when we finally got ready to actually go live, we had 2 sessions, big rooms, where our business office and procurement office stood and told them, here's the plan for this. And then said, if you have any questions, do these things. And then let me tell you about our SWAT members. Every one of these sessions, we had 2 SWAT members present. So they were signing up for all of these sessions to come and help us facilitate. I was in the room. I have another lady who trains with me. She was always in the room. They had, both the business and procurement office had people in the room as well, and we always had 2 SWAT members present. We let anytime people came into training, they knew who the SWAT members were, so that they knew, because we had already told the SWAT members, you're our first tier of support. We want people to ask you the questions when something comes up. Not only that, they were the ones who were at the lab sessions. They were there as well. I'm going to talk a lot about resources in just a minute. Our SWAT members manned our resources as well, the ways that they could actually not come to sessions or not come to a lab session, but be able to get a hold of somebody to actually answer a question. When we went live, after we went live, they were the first ones in the system. They were the first ones that got in. The first day we went live, not everybody could get in, our SWAT members could. They went in there, they started putting transactions in, they started doing things. If any of you guys know anything about training, you always know that if you're doing the training, you're going to learn more about it than the people sitting in the seats. So we knew these guys had been in there and in there and in there, and they were the ones who were the first ones in. Let me say this, I mentioned earlier that we had a couple of members of our SWAT team who didn't actually help us with the facilitation pieces of it. One of the 2 was one of our guys in athletics. We knew there was no way he was going to be able to help, especially beginning of year. They are so busy getting stuff going, but he brought things to the table during training that nobody else brought. He had some very, very unique situations. They knew they needed to get those worked out and make sure everything worked right for them. That was one of the reasons he was chosen. We knew from the very, very beginning he would not be able to assist us once we went live and with all of the actual trainings. That was fine. You have to know you're always going to need people like that, because they're going to be those outliers, those unique people that are going to pull that stuff in that nobody else is going to see, but if it doesn't work right for them the first time, it's going to be an issue. So we knew that that happened, and I will tell you, we had 10 consistent people who signed up for our trainings to help once we did that. 10 consistent SWAT team members that actually helped us with that. Once we went live, the SWAT team members, like I said, were the first in the system. And then, not only that, but once everybody got in, we held additional lab sessions. The first 2 weeks we went live, we were back in our training room, and we were there 4 times a day for the first week. So we had 20 trainings, 20 open lab sessions that first week that people could come to. They could come over. They were actually working live in the system at that point, so they could come in, bring anything that they needed, and we would answer those questions. We had SWAT team members at these sessions every single time. And I'll tell you something unique that happened, because we thought, we'll do it the first week, and then we'll kind of gauge and see what's going on with campus and see if we need to do it for another week. Well, what happened was we did do it for another week, but we had a whole different setup the second week. The second week we were on campus, what happened was one of our SWAT team members, actually on Thursday of that first week, she said, hey, would it be okay if I brought some people from my office over, and while we're over there, if other people come in, I'll be happy to help them, but I can also help the people in my office do this stuff. And let me tell you an advantage to this, and this is what they all said. if we're away from the office, nobody else is interrupting us. So the problem was, we get into a new system, they're trying to get in there and do stuff and still manage all of the interruptions that are coming. So they're working in something new and then get interrupted. Have to go back, figure out where they were, or start all over again, and it was getting very frustrating for them. So that first week, we had somebody from one of our SWAT team members, her department, she brought 4 people over with her. We set up computers so that everybody had a computer to work on. They worked on their stuff, and then word got out. So the second week, that's all we did. People would call and say, can I bring my team over this day? Will somebody be there? And the answer was absolutely. And so the second week, almost all of our trainings the second week, it was departments. People were coming in and bringing their whole groups of people so that they could get the very, very specific questions answered that they needed to. And then let me tell you about resources that we gave them. We had video resources for them. The PowerPoints were available to everybody. And then we had PDFs. And I'm going to tell you about 2 resources that we used that were fantastic. Not only did we have the videos and job aids I just mentioned, but we used Skype and Yammer. So when I tell you we did 9 training sessions, the very first one was how to use Skype and Yammer. So that was us. So we taught everybody who had to use this system how to get on Skype and how to get on Yammer. Guess who we told them their first line of defense was for questions in Skype and Yammer? The SWAT team. We had a lot of our SWAT team members come in and say, I'm getting people Skyping me all the time asking questions. That was exactly what we wanted. And I want to say this was not to take any work away from our business office or our procurement office at all. Well, the reason that we did this again was because very often the business office and the procurement office, when we asked them a question about how to do something, they would say, give me a minute and let me get in there, because that's not the way they're working with the system. They're working with the other side of the system. So while they know it, they're not working every day in the here's how I'm entering a requisition, or here's how I'm entering these expenses, and they would have to jump in and do it. These people knew exactly what they were doing because they're doing it every single day. So our first 2 trainings were held for Skype and Yammer. And it became a huge benefit to this group, especially the Yammer piece. On the Yammer piece, we had created a group originally for the SWAT team. They're the ones who got in and they asked huge questions, and they would say, hey, this isn't working right. You told us we could do this. And there were a lot of times we were tweaking what we were telling them because what we understood it would do and then the actual way it worked was 2 different things. And so that group we kept closed just for that first SWAT group so that they could get in there and figure out exactly how to work things. We opened up a whole new group for the entire campus. Anybody could join the other group. It was wide open, and this was the group we used for Yammer. One of the things that we found, and this is what we promoted, if you have a question, post it in Yammer. Because if you have it, I guarantee you somebody else on campus has it. And even if somebody else has gotten it answered, then I guarantee you it's going to help if it's out there. We taught them how to search Yammer. We taught them how to go through how to look at the files and the notes. We taught them how to tag so that they could use Yammer effectively. And so we're telling them, it doesn't matter if it's been posted. Please post it again. If you figure something out, please post that. And you know what? We had people do that as well. Because we would tell people, even if you're sitting and somebody says, oh, I knew that, I guarantee you there's somebody else who doesn't know it. I can't tell you how many times I've been training on something and I will just offhandedly mention something that we do, and somebody comes up to me after training and says, hey, you mentioned this, what were you talking about? And I forget, not everybody knows everything and how to work with it. So while it seems very common to us, there were things that weren't real common to people, so we encourage them. If you figure out how to do something, post it so everybody can see it. Yammer was a huge hit. We had some people very resistant to it, and my description of Yammer, because people look at it, and if they have any familiarity with Facebook at all, they think, oh, this is Facebook. And so I always tell them, it is Facebook without all the drama. And we actually, if you've not used Yammer, it's a business piece. You set up groups in Yammer instead of having friends in Yammer. And so you can either close it or open it. We left this wide open. But Yammer had 2 pieces to it. Not only did it have the question piece, and this is what I always tell everybody when we're using Yammer. Anybody can answer a question. So if you're in the group, you can go in and answer a question on Yammer, which means anybody across campus can answer questions about our finance and procurement or the HR stuff. But the nice thing about Yammer is we actually can set up notifications. So anytime anyone posts anything in Yammer, I'm getting a notification. Tracy, my assistant, she gets a notification. Our business office, our procurement people, our HR people, they're all getting notifications. So we have our eyes in there too, just to make sure that the answers are right. And I will tell you, 99.5% of the time, the answers are right. It is very, very, very seldom that we have to correct somebody on something, on an answer that they give in Yammer. I will also tell you this, the majority of the answers did not come from any of us. They came from other people across campus, and not just the SWAT members. That was the interesting piece of Yammer that came up. As we encouraged the SWAT members, and by the way, if they signed up to monitor or to help a lab session, they were also signing up to monitor Yammer and Skype for that time too. And so they would keep stuff up in case people had questions. And the reason we did that was because everybody knew the times we had set aside for those lab sessions, so they knew somebody was available. So they knew they could get a quick answer. It wasn't just, I'm going to throw this answer out in Yammer and see if somebody answers me. They knew somebody was on there. But what we found, as people watched Yammer, and they started watching that our SWAT members, not the HR department, not the business office, not procurement, not us, we weren't the ones answering the question, they got more comfortable with answering people's questions. And so it really built up to a thing where, basically, if you look into it now, the only questions you'll see our business office or our procurement office answer is when somebody says, hey, I just got in today and my cost center balances, they're not matching what my supervisor's is. What's going on? And then you'll see the business office answer. If it is I got in here and I need to know how to do this, then it's going to be somebody else on campus that's going to answer that question 99% of the time, because they are just, everybody's in there, they're using it as a resource. And then, of course, our SWAT members, they were our biggest resource in this. And like I said, everybody knew who they were. We broadcast this across campus. We thanked them over and over again. We had pictures of them out there all over the place. But they did such a great job. I can't even tell you, because I knew every time we were asking them to do something, my heart was breaking a little bit, because I knew we were asking them to pull time away from the time they needed to get stuff done. And they were so willing to do it, and they did such a great job with this. The next piece of this was, okay, we've gone live. What do we do now? How are we going to keep this up and keep all of this? Because as you know, we're in a system now, it's going to update on its own. How are we going to get the message out to everybody? We didn't want the Yammer usage to fall away as people got really familiar with it. We wanted them to know and comfortable that it was there. As people got familiar with the system, we knew there'd be less and less questions in there. So how do we keep things going? And we decided to build user groups. Now, I will tell you, user groups is a whole new concept for people. User groups as a facilitated classroom is basically what it is, which is a whole new concept for most teachers. And so it's a whole new way to do things. This was another area where we said, you know what, we can't have this be the content experts. We can't have it be the business department. We can't have it be the procurement department. We can't have it be us, because then, again, if we're in the front of the room, they look at it as a training session. This needs to be a user group, and if you guys have attended good user groups, you know that they function very well with collaboration. That's the whole point of a user group. So we sat down again with 8 of our SWAT members who said, hey, yeah, we'll be more than happy to head this up. We'll build a committee and we'll head this up for you. We sat down with them and we said, here's how a user group goes. Let's figure this out. Let's figure out what we need to do, what's going to be the best format. So what we built was a facilitated structure. People walked into this user group training, and I will tell you, we had a room that looked like this. We had tables set up. We had bigger tables because we had 10 to a table. That's a great size for a group, by the way, is 10. Anywhere between 6 and 10 is a great size. And we had tables set up, and they walked in the room, and people would stop. Because they're used to coming to training where we have them in rows and everybody's looking at the front of the room, or we have a U-shaped table and everybody's sitting around so that they can see what's going on. And they walked into our big ballroom and they just stopped. And then they said, where are we supposed to sit? Sit anywhere you want to. And they would just kind of look at us. So one of the things that did happen, that we knew would happen, that we didn't want to happen, was they tend to gravitate to their department. They all come in together and they want to sit together. We didn't let them. We were asking them, hey, you guys split up, because you guys are going to be talking about the same thing. We don't want that. We want you to get ideas from other people. They did. You know what? It was one of those things. When we had the training session, I was sitting with the SWAT members, and I'm telling them, you guys, you can't let the department, we can't let the department sit together. And they're like, How are we going to keep them apart? I mean, they really think people are going to get really mad at you. Not one bit of kickback. We asked them to split up, they split up. So they split up, they sat at different tables in the room, and then what happened was with our one of the questions, it was a huge question that was coming up, had to do with reporting. So they said for this first user group, let's talk a little bit about some of the reporting. And so what they did was there were actually 7 tabs that had to do with reporting in the system. We had different tables. We had a SWAT member at each table. And then we had the content experts in the room. So we had people from the business department and from procurement in the room at a separate table. Because again, we didn't want this to become a training session that they're going to look to them for the answers. We wanted it to become collaboration. We gave each table one of the tabs and said, hey, here's what we want you guys to do. Tell us how you're using this, what's working effectively, what issues are you having, or questions that you need answered. We gave them 20 minutes to do that. Everyone was very concerned. All of the SWAT members that were on the committee were very concerned it was going to be very negative. Now, I will tell you this. We had a great rollout. It was pretty smooth. We always say that, and you hear people say, oh, it was smooth. We were not frolicking in fields, throwing up flowers, saying, oh, this is great, Oracle Cloud's fantastic. We had issues. There were a few things that happened. That's always going to happen. You're going to have a few little bumps you got to get across, or new things you need to figure out. But for the most part, we had a very, very smooth go live for our finance and procurement. But having said that, reporting was something that people were still dealing with. They were trying to figure out some things, how to do this. So as we were doing this, one of the things the SWAT members were extremely concerned about was negativity. Because they said, what if people come in and all they're doing is griping about what's going on? During that first session, the first thing we asked them to do, tell us what you're doing. Share with your table what you are doing and how this is working for you. That is the best step you can take in a facilitated group. Start out on the positive, and then when it comes time to tell us the issues you're having or questions that you have, they're just listing stuff in there. And they just go down a list, and it does not turn into this big gripe fest. And it did not. We had a great day that day. Of the about 120 people that we had that we trained, and let me tell you, about 12 of those 120 are just part-time users. There are technicians who actually order the computers and stuff, but they just order, and then they're able to reassign that to an admin assistant who actually takes care of it. So they're not in the system a ton. They're just using it for ordering. So take those people out. So out of about 110 people, we had 73 people show up for that first user group. That is phenomenal. We would have been thrilled with 30 if we'd had 30 people come. We had 73 people come to our first user group. Very positive atmosphere. One of the things we did, after we gave them some time to all talk, we went around to the tables. Hey, tell us some stuff you're doing on this. Furious writing. We were also taking notes because we posted all of this stuff in Yammer for them as well, so that we're taking notes on what they're saying that they figured out they could do. So each table went around and told us, here's the good stuff. Then we went around and we made a list of the questions. Any question that could be answered that day, we answered in the room. I will tell you this, about 50% of those questions were answered by other people in the room, not our content experts. About 50% of the questions that were asked by the actual users in the room, and not just the SWAT members either. So of all the questions we had, probably about 20 of them were answered right there in the room by other people. The content experts were able to answer a few more questions, but we had a list of questions that then went back to our SWAT team for them to do follow-up with the business and procurement office. And after they did that, we posted all of those results in Yammer within the first week. So they knew by asking those questions, bringing those issues to the user group, they were going to get the answers to the questions that they had. They are now doing this once every 6 to 8 weeks. They have done now 2 on their own that I've not even been involved in. I don't have to go anymore to tell them, hey, here's a good way to do this. I will tell you, for the second one, they decided for a different structure because some new stuff came out on reporting. So they said, we're going to do a real quick run through and demo. And they actually, I thought this was great, about 4 of them took different areas of the reporting, and then they got up and demoed that, and then they took questions. I will tell you, the mood was a little bit different in that one. We actually went to the training session, and while they were training, we were back to the U-shaped training training table, and there was a little more, there were some people who were a little more negative about some of the responses that we got, but the session was still great. Next session, they went back to a facilitated training. They went back to the groups, and it's all working out really well. They're on their own now. So now we have this whole team across campus, 110 people, who are all working together. They're not relying on us, and they're not relying on the business office. And let me tell you, the two biggest drawbacks with that is time. I have people right now, I go to my office every day. Right now we're in the midst of training for HR, which like I told you is again different. We have a whole lot more people to train, but our learning curve is much lower for this. But I get back to my office and I'll have 10 messages. And people who were just in training that morning will call me and say, hey, I'm not sure where you are, but I have a question for you. I'm in training. You were just with me this morning, you know, so they forget those things. They've called me 10 minutes after they left training. I'm not there. I'm not even back in my office usually till it's time to go home. And so they're not getting answers very quick, which is one of the reasons we're encouraging this. This has worked out great for our finance and procurement pieces. It has been awesome. This whole model has worked really well for us. But here are the lessons that we learned. The SWAT members, better than we anticipated. Now I'm going to tell you, when we sat and talked about these people and they started throwing out names, it's like, yes, quality. Quality, quality, this person knows what they're doing. They're giving us this list. We've worked with them before. We know they can handle this. They're giving us the list of people. We know they're going to be able to answer questions. They're going to be available. They're going to do it. They've always been very positive. They know we're going to help them as much as we can, which instills that trust with us, which makes them do it. But still, we know they're going to go above and beyond. I can't even tell you how much better they were than what we ever anticipated them to be. And I'll tell you this, people surprised me. There were people that came that I thought, yeah, she might work in this a lot, but she's not very outgoing. I don't know how great she's going to be with other people. And they were awesome. They were fantastic. So don't ever get into that, well, they don't have a very good personality thing. They probably wouldn't be very good working with the rest of campus, because people will surprise you. And they were much better than we ever anticipated they could be. The lab sessions, we needed more. We needed more when we did it for the SWAT team members. We needed more when we actually did it for when we were training the rest of campus. We needed bigger blocks of time that people could just come in and get questions answered. One of the things we found, especially with the lab sessions for campus, when we just opened those up, we had a ton of people coming in, and we only had 2 SWAT team members there. So we were calling people, saying, hey, could you run over here and give us a hand? We've got like 12 people in the lab right now, and only 2 people over here helping them. And when I said we had 12 people in the lab, 12 people from 12 different departments, all with 12 different questions at the same time. So we were having to call people to get them to come in. We needed a whole lot more of those actual just functional lab sessions. And then, as much as I love Yammer, the file section in Yammer is terrible because you cannot organize it. So it's just organized by the last thing you put in there, or the last thing that was modified. And that is the other thing that I will tell you about Yammer. We lost some stuff. We didn't actually lose it, but people would get in there and they would delete stuff instead of just downloading stuff. So we'd have to go in and people would say, I can't find this file. We'd have to go in and upload it again. That is one of the caveats. Don't think I would change that though. It's just one of those things you have to deal with. We used in Yammer both the pin section and the files a lot because we have a lot of resources outside that we are using. And I will tell you, since we've started working on HR has come up with a grid that actually, on our webpage, that actually takes them to the resources. And it has everything listed by topic and by the type of employee that we have on campus. And it actually takes them straight to the actual resources. They could still be housed in Yammer, but it would take them straight to that resource so that they wouldn't have to actually search through and try to find it. And then email communication. I will say this, the lady who's in charge of our HR, she is an email tiger. Man, she is great with email. And we send out emails every single week reminding people, hey, you have a choice. You can either come to training or go watch these videos and jump into the system and practice this for training before we actually go live. And we're doing those every single week. That is something I would recommend you to do. And if you guys are like us, we hear all the time, I'm sick of seeing these bulk emails. I'm sick of seeing these bulk emails. But I am telling you, for these, they have been very, very effective. And here's one of the things we're hearing people say. When we have them in training and they say, well, I want to go back and practice, but what if I forget how to go log in? Because we're logging into a different system for training than we are for the actual live system, of course, and they're forgetting how to go find that, even though we show them at the beginning of training. I'll tell them, well, you know that email that we sent out to you that has the links, and they'll go, I've got that. I know where that is. So the fact that we're being repetitive with that, they're able still to go back and find those resources. Every one of those emails has the links to videos that they can watch so they can walk through. It also has links to PDFs, and it has links to policies. And so and the training link. So if they want to come back, which we've had people do for the HR training, if they can get back to those, and they're finding those emails. So that is one thing that I would highly recommend. This whole model was new for us. And I'll tell you, I was a little bit leery about that, because if I'm doing training, I'm controlling it. It's up to me. I know how good or bad it's going to be. I can kind of plan for variables. I was nervous because when I have to sit back, and they were nervous. They would tell you this too. Our finance, procurement, and HR departments have been awesome to work with through these training models. But they will tell you the same thing. They were nervous. They were nervous about having to step out and do something that they hadn't done before and to get it done effectively. And because everybody was so open to the collaboration, this worked out great. Because we had those teams, we had that whole SWAT team, this worked out great. I will tell you, you take any one of those factors away and this would not have been have been done as well as it was. It would not have run as smoothly. And I will tell you, one of the things that we had in these trainings, I always try to stay very positive because I know how much of a struggle it's going to be. Recently for HR, we've been training our physical plant and our custodians, who are great, great people. And for them, I'm telling you, the learning curve for HR, for everybody's like this, that's the learning curve for physical plant, because they've been punching a clock. These people do not even understand that we've been doing time in an electronic system for decades. They have no idea. We had one guy asking training the other day, what are you going to do when this crashes? And we're like, what? And he said, what are you going to do if this crashes and I don't get paid? And one of our HR people was in there. She's really sweet. She's really quiet and mild-mannered. And she said, well, this is the system. And he went, I want your address so that I can come find you when I don't get my paycheck. And I said, you guys, you do realize, right, we've done this forever. While you're punching a time clock, when you get done, your timekeeper is going in and taking what you're punching and putting it into a system just like this. The only difference is this is 30 years newer than what she's been using. And he just looks at me because he didn't know. And so for them, this has been like this. But let me tell you what happened the next day. They came and fixed the hinges on our squeaky door in our office, and we didn't even have to ask them. And it's like, wow, thank you so much. We'll never know when somebody comes in the office now, but thank you so much for doing that. But I will tell you, that is the feeling that we get at the end of trainings. When they know that we're all there trying to help them, it becomes this huge collaborative thing. When it's not a, hey, you have to do this now, when it's more we're trying to help them understand why, and they know that we're going to be there to support them. We've got this great feeling across campus, and I am glad to say that even though I kind of had to let go of some of the training pieces, we haven't changed our attitude about training on campus. We've really tried to build an attitude when we're doing training that we're really only here to help you. That's what we want to do. We just want to make this better for you. We want to give you something that may be a little bit difficult to learn, but eventually is going to make your life so much better. It's going to make it easier for you to do your job. It's going to be more efficient and more effective, and we'll help you as much as we can. And I am very proud to say that through this whole thing, even though the training was kind of out of our hands, we still have that attitude across campus. People know that's how we feel about it, and that's our goal. So this whole process has been fantastic. It worked really well for us, especially for such a big project. Anybody have any questions? Well, that means either I did a really good job or a really bad job, one of the two.
I guess, can you describe a little bit about how you organize the resources that people could go and access?
Yeah, let me just grab that for you real quick, because I'll show you what it looks like now. And I think we actually stole this idea from somebody else. Thank you. Here's our grid, and this is what HR has now that they've put together. So on this grid, all of this is arrangeable. You can click on any one of these things and change it by audience, by topic, and then the job aids are the PDFs, and these are actually our videos that we've made that go with these. I've made a lot more videos for HR for the Go Live than I did for the actual procurement pieces, because for the procurement pieces, there were some things that were different depending on what they were doing. So for every video that they had, it would be, when we were talking about, they would say, well, I could show you this, but then when they get to this screen, if they pick this, they need to do this, or if they pick this, they need to do this, and they decided it wouldn't be as easy to do that as it would to have a job aid out there, just the PDF. So that's what they did for that. So this is what we have now. Yammer, again, if you've used it, just a listing of files. So this makes it much easier for the different groups to be able to go in and get their actual resources. Okay? Any other questions? Okay, thank you guys very much for coming.